People often discuss Madame LaLaurie's mansion in New Orleans, where she kept humans captive in her basement. But did you know there is a similar house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where a woman in the 1940s kept humans captive in her basement too? This story involves witchcraft, Christian Science, and a haunted house. Come join me, Holly, at the Murder She Shed for this bizarre true crime story right from my little she shed. I usually tell a rarely heard true crime story here 2 or 3 times weekly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button in order to keep up with all my true crime cases. Now let's begin. As in Oklahoma, this is an especially intriguing case to me. There was a beautiful house in Tulsa. At least it was beautiful on the outside, but the inside was said to contain a dark spirit that is said to still haunt that area today. The home once stood at 10 East 21st Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But due to the many kids that broke into the house for a good scare, it was torn down in 1975. This leads us to the story of Carolann Smith. Carolann Mary Smith was born as Opal Mary Carey on May 18, 1893 in Indianapolis, Indiana. For this story, we will call her Carolann, so there is no confusion. Her father was Thomas Carey and her mother was Eva Carey. Carolann had 2 sisters, and when Carolann was only 9 years old, her mother passed away. In 1910, her father, who now had to provide for his 3 daughters, moved to Muskogee, Oklahoma, for an amazing job opportunity that had been offered to him. After moving to Muskogee when Carolann was just 21 years old, she met a man a year older than her, and they quickly and deeply fell in love. Faye Smith worked as a shipping clerk at the Atlas Supply Company. The couple were married February 3, 1914. She had not changed her name to Carolann yet and became Opal Mary Smith. Carolann sadly lost 2 baby boys after miscarriages. Carolann's husband wrote her tender letters whenever he was on work trips, bought her frequent gifts, and almost everything she desired for her home. She had everything she had ever wanted except children. She had been spoilt by her father and now her husband. She was used to living an extravagant lifestyle. By 1930, Faye and Carolann were living in Casper, Wyoming. Faye had started working as a salesman for the Williamsport Wire Rope Company, which sent him and Carolann to live in Wyoming and Oregon for a few years. Later in 1930, Faye was relocated by his employer to Tulsa, Oklahoma. The couple moved in the Sophia Park Plaza at 1500 South Frisco Avenue in the upscale part of town. In the summer of 1933, in the midst of the Great Depression, Faye was laid off from the Williamsport Wire Rope Company. He did quickly find another job as a life insurance salesman. Sometime during this time, Carolann got involved in witchcraft and Christian Science. Christian Science wants their members isolated from the mainstream society. Members are not allowed to seek medical treatment, and healing of your body is controlled solely by your mind. Witches believe that the human mind has the power to affect change in a similar way that Christian Science does. She became obsessed with these 2 religions, so basically she put these 2 together and made up her own religion. On January 23, 1934, Faye called his wife from work around 5:40 in the evening, telling her he would be home in 2 minutes for dinner. As he was leaving work, the other employees would notice that he actually seemed cheerful and really good spirit. He never came home, and Carolann called police the next morning at around 5 a.m. That evening, around 5, a man had stopped at the side of the road because his truck had ran out of gas. He grabbed his gas container and just started walking down the road. He seen a car about 100 yards off the road and just decided to go ask them about taking him to get some more gas. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed no one appeared to be in it, so he started to head back to the road. Suddenly, something caught his eye, which shocked him. It looked like a man crumpled over about 20 feet from the car. He walked up and found the man dead. His body had broken the gas stock in falling. He apparently had leaned over the gas and used a stick to push the trigger. The keys to his automobile were found in his pocket. He was still sitting up when found, leaning over. It would quickly be established that this was Faye Smith, and supposedly he had unalived himself. A note was found in his pocket saying a letter to his wife would be in their post office box. Allegedly, Faye had been upset about losing a nice paying job. When Carolann was told of her husband's death by officers, they noticed that she did not cry or act shocked. Carolann had previously taken a $25,000 life insurance out on her husband and received it after his death. 1 month after the death of Carolann's husband, her maid Beulah Walker passed away after running out of Carolann's house. She ran straight in front of a vehicle and was struck by the car. No one would ever know why she had been in such a hurry to leave Carolann's house. But Carolann ended up profiting from Beulah's death too. She had taken an insurance policy out on Beulah and had claimed she was her cousin. Carolann told her father she was lonely in the house without her husband and requested for him to move in with her. He moved in 7 months after the death of her maid. Her father would pass away. She also, surprisingly, had a life insurance out on him. This is when the story gets bizarre. Virginia Evans met Carolann, who at the time was using another alias, Meredith Fontaine. They met in 1937 at a Christian Science reading room in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They became friends, and about a year later, Carolann asked Virginia to move in with her at her apartment at the Sophia Plaza Park. Virginia was 20 years younger than Carolann. In 1938, Carolann Smith met Willetta Horner at a grocery store. They became friends, and Willetta later moved in with Carolann and Virginia. Willetta was 21 years younger than Carolann. Soon after Willetta moved in, she began telling Virginia that Willetta was a lady of the street and that she had found her on First Street downtown. She said Willetta had participated in a lot of unhealthy, sinful with both men and women. She told Virginia that it was their job to save her soul. Then she began telling Willetta that Virginia was mentally unstable and wanted to kill her father, and that Virginia's mother hated her for this. She told Willetta that it was their job to save Virginia's soul. Later in 1938, the apartment manager at the Sophia Park Plaza raised Carolann's rent because she was just a difficult tenant. Carolann and the two young women moved out after Willetta Horner found the duplex at 10 East 21st Street, which would later be dubbed the Hex House. At the Hex House, the two women would say that Carolann had complete mind control over them. They would later say she was a witch that had hexed them into obeying her every command. Soon after moving into the Hex House, Carolann expected the girls to return home as soon as they left work. She also had Willetta and Virginia cut off contact with all their family and friends. Carolann created a community pot, which Willetta and Virginia were expected to put their paychecks into this so she could pay the expenses. Carolann began to routinely perform purification rituals by reading quotes from the Bible and providing sermons. Willetta and Virginia were expected to attend and listen. These rituals often got loud when Carolann gave an impassioned sermon. When the women had first moved into the Hex House, that Hex House was actually a duplex, but no one lived on the other side. Then in 1942, Andrew Malek, who moved to Tulsa because he got a job at the Sinclair Prairie Oil Company, started renting the other side of the duplex. Carolann was very upset about this and wanted him gone. At first, she made Willetta and Virginia be so noisy at night that this might actually drive him out of the house. When those efforts did not work, Carolann had Willetta go outside and strike Malek on the head and shoulders with the stick. Kind of odd. Willetta then ran across the front yard claiming Malek had and battered her. The police were called. Malek was arrested. And on his day in court, all three women accused Malek of being a peeping Tom and battering Willetta. A judge found Malek guilty of all charges. Malek was fined and forced to move. She got her way again. At some point, Carolann began telling the girls, "You are my lamb, I am your shepherd, and you must follow my law." One time, a friend from Stroud, Oklahoma came to visit Virginia at their house. Carolann became super angry at Virginia and threatened to kick her out. Carolann told Virginia that she could stay only if she accepted her punishment. Carolann tied Virginia's hands to a chair and then whipped her with a bullwhip. In order to scam money out of Virginia's father, Carolann called Mr. Evans and told him that his daughter was suffering from mental and physical ailments, and she needed to hire a nurse to care for her. Tom Evans, Virginia's father, paid $35 a week for a nurse named Thelma to care for Virginia. Of course, this nurse did not even exist. When Mr. Evans would go visit his daughter, Carolann updated him on Thelma's progress with Virginia. The few times that he got to see his daughter, she looked exhausted, like she had been up all night. A couple of times, Carolann appeared with patches of her hair missing. Mr. Evans was told that Virginia had actually struck her violently during a relapse and yanked hair from her head. During World War II, each family received a ration book, which allowed you to purchase sugar, meat, cooking oil, and canned goods. When you bought an item being rationed, you turned in a stamp. Once you ran out of the stamps, you needed to wait until the next month for more. The government determined the number of stamps you received based on your household size. And Carolann, of course, played by her own rules. She ordered 8 ration books for herself. Carolann claimed she had 7 children. Unfortunately, this very federal crime came to the attention, or fortunately, I should say, came to the attention of authorities who raided her home. When they raided her house in 1944, they did not expect to find what was in the basement. When they walked down into the dark, cold basement, they found 2 women shivering and huddled in the corner, dirty with tattered clothes on. The women were malnourished and would only say they had been hexed by Carolann for 7 long years to do everything she wanted, or they would go to hell. The women had been habitually beaten and berated and told that evil thoughts were eating out their souls. Tulsa World newspaper wrote that there was a angle to Carolann's control, but due to modest behavior in the 40s, they would not mention the unspeakable offenses. Virginia said she was forced to start living in the basement because of an eye infection, which Carolann did not want in the house. The women were forced to sleep in the basement on orange crates with cardboard on top that had sheets on the makeshift hard beds that had not been washed in 2 years. In the basement, there was 2 small built-in laundry tubs where the girls claimed they were forced to bathe instead of being permitted to use the bathroom upstairs. Also, in the basement was the washing machine, which the girls said they were not even permitted to use. They lived in filth because they were denied even water for their own laundry. They were forced at times to go hungry. The basement was unheated and they were forced to sleep there all winter even in below freezing temperatures. The women were only given old tattered clothes to wear, while upstairs, Carolann was just living in luxury. She was living in wealth. She was living it up. They found closets full of expensive clothing, little of which had ever been worn. A pile of women's hats, never worn. 45 pairs of expensive shoes, never worn. And a cache of expensive perfume, including 2 $50 bottles. A heap of expensive silverware and plates, high-priced and scarce food, and numerous knickknacks of doubtful value. Officers observed that Carolann apparently had a mania for buying without regard for utility. The house was full of various petty decorative items. One diamond pin found among the hoard contained 268 small diamonds. There was enough makeup in the house to fill a complete drugstore. The authorities also found a treasure trove of books on witchcraft and ritual magic. The police found handwritten journal entries about Carolann's belief in controlling the human mind through witchcraft. These belongings and Virginia's claim of being actually hexed by Carolann had the community start calling her the She-Bengali. The Bengali refers to a person who attempts to control another person using hypnosis, suggestion, or personal charm, often with evil intent. Some of the Hex House neighbors said they could sometimes hear screams and groans coming from the Hex House. There also was reports of Carolann yelling off the balcony more than once at the 2 women below while they were digging holes in the backyard at night. The police went back to the house and began digging in the backyard. 4 feet down, they found the embalmed body of a dog. But the steel casket was lacking. The body was wrapped in a bed sheet. In its coffin was a paper suit box. The two girls had stated that when the dog died, they had the body embalmed, bought a baby casket for it, and buried the pet at a moonlit ceremony. You got to understand, this was back then where actually embalming and getting a coffin for a dog was actually pretty weird. This was a weird thing for the girls to admit. They went and had this done. The Tulsa undertaker, who actually embalmed the dog's body, declared he personally saw the dog placed into the casket, then sealed in an airtight vault which was buried at the described spot. He was astonished at being told the vault and casket were missing. What became of the casket and to what purpose was it eventually put to was becoming a matter of intense speculation. The police were intrigued by the development and said, some more digging will be done around there. Mystified by the absence of the coffin, officers reopened the hole as a crowd the size of a 4th of July picnic gathering, looking on eagerly. Although several more dead dogs were found, an actual human body was never found. But till this day, people believe there could still be bodies found there. And I'm thinking she buried them underneath those dogs. I've heard that happening before. To mask the scent. Carolann was in the process of getting life insurance on Virginia and Willetta. I suppose it was just a matter of time before she would actually decide how they would die. Virginia perhaps would have been easier for her since she had already been tricking her father for years about her ailing health. Carolann received a year in prison for telling the women what to say at trial, for defrauding Virginia's father across state lines, and making false claims to obtain ration books. Carolann only received a year's worth of prison time and upon her release was lost to history. It is said she changed her name again and no one knows what became of her after that. The Hex House became the place kids in Tulsa went to get creeped out until it was torn down in 1975. The basement where Virginia and Willetta were enslaved, however, reportedly still remains beneath the blacktop, and both the rock foundation and the original front steps can still be seen around the lot. Parking lot doesn't get a lot of use these days, but when it was in regular use, there were reports of car lights coming on by themselves. Whether or not the location is actually haunted, there's no doubt that the Hex House left an indelible mark on Tulsa and its histories. Well, guys, hope y'all enjoyed this old story of intrigue. I may have time to make one more story before going on vacation. Next week, we are headed to Colorado on a motorcycle ride. So most likely you won't hear from me for a whole week. Yeah, I'm just going to be enjoying my ride. Anyway, I'm going to end y'all with some bloopers as usual. And Simon wants to tell y'all bye. Here he is. He was prepared, wasn't he? He was so ready to tell y'all bye. He couldn't wait another second. He's been bugging me to tell y'all bye for a while. He says he loves y'all. And he hopes y'all have a great week. Be blessed. Be a blessing to others. And we love y'all. Bye! My husband's grandpa was quite the character. He was a mess, I swear. Of course, he's passed away now, but he kept having a skunk that was getting in his trailer. He lived out in the country, he owned cow. He's just a big old farmer. He lived in a trailer in the country, and that skunk would get up under his floor. And I guess he had a hole back in his cabinet somewhere, because that skunk would just come right in his house. And he had a cat in his house also. He loved cats. He actually had a sticker on the back of his old Ford truck that said, "Have you hugged your cat today?" It was a cat fanatic. Anyway, he had a cat that was black, just like this skunk. And Grandpa always slept with sitting right up against his recliner. I mean, he's an old farmer. That's just what they do out here. You never know when you're going to have to protect your cattle or whatever. So he slept like that a lot of times. And he was sleeping in his recliner when suddenly that skunk kind of bumped up against his legs. Well, he thought it was his cat. So he reached down to pet it. When he did, it just squirted his whole trailer. So he jumps up, realizing it's not his cat, and he grabs it and he begins to shoot. As it's trying to get back to its hole in the cabinet, it's running for its life. He's just shooting the crap out of his trailer. This is a true story, and this is how I know this, because we went and spent the night with him one night. And of course, his trailer still stunk horribly, and he didn't tell us this before we came. And we got there, and there was freaking holes all in his cabinet, everywhere, and his dishes. And I'm like, did you shoot at everything but the skunk? He said, oh, I missed the damn thing. So that damn skunk got away, but I think it returned a few other times. I can't remember the story. It was a long time ago, but I don't think he was ever able to kill that skunk. I know it's a crazy story. It's an old farm story. After moving to Muskogee when Carolann was just 21 years old, white lightning's still the biggest thrill of all. Proud to be an Okie from Muskogee, a place where the squares can have a ball. We still wave a glory down at the courthouse, and white lightning's still the biggest thrill of all. Sorry, he doesn't like what I'm saying. I don't blame him. We should stop while we're ahead. Started renting the other side. Carolann was just living in luxury. She was living in wealth. She was living it up. She was living la vista. That would say, I don't know what that means, but he added it. Hey, Bubba.